anyone that's saying, oh, it's only the League Cup, we don't need it, obviously it would have been great to win it. Welcome back to the Arsenal Humans podcast with me, Luce. I hope you're good. It's actually crazy because I was trying to be really organised this week with the pod, and I was like, you know what, let me come up with a little bit of an intro, like roughly the direction of the pod. But stupidly, I was doing it on Saturday evening at that point. Obviously, we had got through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League for the men. The women excelled with a 5-star performance, a 5-0 result against West Ham that day earlier on, and I was at the Emirates. So I was like, oh my God, amazing, this is going to go well. Hopefully tomorrow can add to it. Sadly, Sunday's performance, obviously we faced Carabao Cup defeat, and I just feel like that just completely put a spanner in the works, completely twisted the vibe I thought this podcast was going to have. Yes, I got a little bit ahead of myself, but I feel like everyone did, and that's probably the most frustrating thing because we were the favourites going into this competition. I'm going to obviously have to talk about that Carabao Cup in a little bit in detail of the actual game, but I'm going to start with the warm-up poll, which obviously had to be based around that defeat. And I feel like a lot of people were saying that going into this game, this is going to fuel Arsenal for the season, or this is going to really psychologically impact them for the rest of the season. And I sort of was a bit on the fence before the game, thinking, I don't know if this has that much power, but obviously it would be great for momentum. But anyways, after the defeat, I thought, you know what, this is going to have some sort of an impact, but I don't know if it's going to be too positive, too negative. So I basically put up the warm-up poll over on the Arsenal Humans podcast account on Instagram. So definitely check out for future polls if you haven't done already. And thank you if you did vote. I feel like I had a lot of people voting on this one, a few comments as well, which was great to see. The question I put out was, does the Carabao Cup defeat have an impact on other silverware Arsenal could get this season? Quite a long-winded question, but you get the vibe. Poll results show 33% of you said yes, it's going to have an impact, and 67% said no. And you know what? It is quite a split answer, because obviously we'd be stupid to think that it's not going to have an impact at all, because it's about momentum. It's about the mindset, and for Arsenal to reach a final again and to not win it again for the men's side is so frustrating and so gutting. And I think it is definitely about the mindset. For me personally, I ultimately think that we're in separate competitions and we've got to view them separately. I think, yes, this is a bit of a knockback, but if anything, sadly we rank competitions and the League Cup is usually put right at the bottom, just below the FA Cup. So obviously out of all the competitions we could have lost, I'm not too upset that it's this one. Obviously, I would have loved to have won silverware. And anyone that's saying, oh, it's only the League Cup, we don't need it, obviously it would have been great to win it. And I know it would have had a positive impact with momentum, but it is a completely different competition. It's frustrating if we then reach the Champions League final or the FA Cup final, because are we going to have that fear in the back of our mind of, we're not very good in these finals, in these positions, is this going to come to haunt us? But obviously when we focus on the league, the Premier League is the most important thing for Arsenal right now, and that's something that we can definitely win. We've basically got both hands on it. It's just whether City can win all their remaining games, and if we drop any points, then that could obviously upset that. Anyways, bit of waffly answer from me, but I do feel like I was a bit on the fence, but I'm going to have to agree with the majority that no, I don't think it's going to impact us, or I don't think it's going to impact us negatively anyways. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify. I'd love to hear them as always. And let's move on to the whatever the weather section. This week we've only got 2, so you guys can come up with the third one. Okay, so it's the whatever the weather sections. Basically, I just list some headlines that happened on or off the pitch for Arsenal. Positive, negative, a bit cloudy. It could be sunny, it could be rainy, a bit cloudy. You know, it could be all of the above. And let's start off with a sunny one. I feel like I normally start off with a sunny one. Recently, I feel like they've all been sunny, but sadly, we don't have them all sunny this week. Anyways, the first one is sunny, and after Saturday's win, which I'll chat about obviously in a minute, Slagers is now unbeaten in her first 16 WSL home matches as manager, which is the longest for the league. And I'm so excited because the next game that we're playing at the Emirates is obviously tonight, which I can't wait to talk about in a bit, because it is Champions League. It's Arsenal versus Chelsea for the first time in this competition. They're facing each other over 2 legs. So that is so exciting to see if obviously she can keep up that winning streak. Yes, this is in the WSL, and obviously I've just mentioned the Champions League, but either way, it's a massive achievement for Slagers. And I think, considering since she's come in, there's been a few dips in the road, but ultimately, if you look at it as a whole, we've got the Champions League and we're doing pretty well in the WSL right now. So I just wanted to spotlight Slagers because I feel like she definitely deserves that credit, and it's quite a cool bit of news, a bit of breaking news to come out of Arsenal. Sadly, there's also more breaking news, and I'm going to put this as a bit of a cloudy one because Arsenal have had 5 players pull out of international duty. This is Saliba, Gabriel, Timber, Eze and Trossard. So those 5 won't be competing for their nations over the next couple of weeks. Is this a bit of a concern? I feel like a lot of people are definitely saying this is really bad, but when you think about it, Eze and Timber were already injured. Obviously, they weren't able to play in the final. Ødegaard wasn't able to play in the final either as well. Yes, potentially this can be a bit of a concern if these injuries continue and it lasts longer than the international break, but ultimately I think maybe these players, I'm trying to see it from an Arsenal lens, quite a positive Arsenal lens, not going to lie, that maybe these players are thinking, right, the Premier League is our priority. We need to make sure we're fit enough to compete in other competitions. We're going to put the international duty to one side just to make sure we fully recover and feel fully fit rather than making it worse and being out for the rest of the season when Arsenal obviously need these players. So I'm hoping it's done in that way and not because it actually should be something we're concerned about. So obviously let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And for the final headline for the whatever the weather section, I want you guys to come up with one. Let me know down in the comments whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, because I feel like there's a lot that could come out of it and there are a lot of smaller headlines that I could have picked out, but I thought, you know what, let me leave it down to you guys, and I haven't done that before, so I'm hoping the comments are full of a few headlines at least, and I'd love to know where your thoughts are at on what you think is a sunny headline, what you think is a bit of a rainy headline. Obviously, the ultimate rainy headline, sadly, is that Carabao Cup final, which, you know what, we're going to have to talk about it at some point, but let's start with 2 positive games, and then we're going to have to get into that final defeat. So we started off the week, Arsenal 2, Leverkusen 0, which actually was my prediction, like spot on, because I said, obviously going into this game we were 1-1 on aggregate, and I said, right, we need to make it convincing, but hopefully we can extend it by a couple goals. So I thought, let's just go with 2-0, it'll be 3-1 overall on aggregate, and that's exactly what happened, which I'm very happy with. I feel like we've got to spotlight a few players in this game, which, you know what, in hindsight, it's a bit bittersweet to highlight these players, because when we look at these players, they didn't actually enter the field, enter the pitch on Sunday, and maybe they could have been the difference. Who knows? Obviously, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the first player I have to highlight for this game has got to be Eze, because I feel like he's shone so bright this game and is actually only the second player to score in all competitions for Arsenal, which is insane in itself. I feel like he's now finding his feet more, he's showing up, and I think that is why it's so bittersweet that he obviously wasn't able to play due to injury at the weekend, because he was a player that we probably needed for that energy that he showed this game. I feel like also Gyökeres had promising moments throughout that game. He was actually controlling the play more and being able to hold the ball successfully, which I feel like sometimes it's a bit hit and miss with him. And of course, I have to highlight Raya, because our keeper pulled off even more vital saves in this game. I feel like it's just a bit of a repetition now. We're seeing it constantly from him, which is just so good. And especially he should be in that conversation that Thierry Henry keeps saying Raya should be in the conversation for player of the season. And I completely agree with that, because when he's performing like this, when he's saving us like this, it makes complete sense. Ultimately, what does this actually mean for Arsenal? Well, it means that we're through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, which we're only one of 2 English sides to do that, because obviously Liverpool managed to turn it around and get the win and go through as well. We've got Sporting in the next round, and I'm pretty excited because I feel like we've got an alright draw, an alright run. So obviously Premier League, as I mentioned in the warm-up poll, Premier League has got to be our focus. But if there is a potential that we could win both, I think we should keep going for it and driving to that. So I'm hoping that players are all back fit, ready for that game, because it'll be pretty much the first game. I think it might be the first game or one of the first. Actually, I think we've got Southampton first, and then we've got the quarterfinals of the Champions League. So it's all happening very quickly. So hopefully next couple of weeks, the guys can take a break and then come back fully fit, ready for this. The second game of the week, which is one that I was at, it was a buzzing atmosphere. It was Arsenal 5, West Ham 0. Another 5-star performance from Arsenal. And you know what? Going into this game, I was feeling quite confident. Firstly, I love going to the Emirates. Hadn't been there for a while because we've had a few away games. We had the international break. And I was like, oh my God, it's going to be such a good atmosphere. The sun was shining, was with some friends. It was just a very, very good vibe. United had also drawn to West Ham earlier that week, which, yes, you can look at it 2 ways. Of West Ham aren't to be underestimated, and obviously that's who we were playing against, but also in terms of the table, it put us in a great position because it meant that United had dropped points. So as long as we win our game in hand, we pretty much are guaranteed second spot in the WSL, which is really exciting. The first thing that I want to just say about this was that I actually missed the Black Stennis goal because we were so quick to score. I was literally getting into the stadium. There was a bit of a queue. I was rushing. Train delays, you love to see it. I was literally trying to get through. And then as I got through, I suddenly heard people shouting. I was like, that sounds like we've just scored. Got down in the first 5 minutes, we had already found the net. And I feel like that pretty much just set the vibe for the rest of the game. Chloe Kelly is a player that I feel like we have to spotlight because she is unreal, and you know what, it makes me so happy that we managed to get her on permanent and she managed to return back to Arsenal because she always comes in clutch, and obviously she got the Player of the Match award as well, but scoring 2 goals, not just one, but she scored those 2 goals, and I think just even her creative play, always striving for the ball, always attacking, and definitely a standout player, as well as obviously her celebrations with Olivia Smith that I mentioned. I'm pretty sure I mentioned that last week's episode or maybe the week before, but I just feel like it's a common occurrence, so it's pretty good. But ultimately, I know that I mentioned this in last week's poll, so definitely go check that out because it's in a little bit more detail. And I feel like the things I sort of was predicting that could potentially happen have pretty much happened, but I'm quite liking how the WSL table is looking right now, because when you look at it, City are in first with 46 points, United are in second with 38, Chelsea are in third with 37, Arsenal are in fourth with 35, but Arsenal still have their 2 games in hand. So if we actually win our 2 games in hand, we fly straight up to second. We go 5 points behind City, which is closing the gap. Now, I'm not getting delusional. I'm not saying we're going to win it, but it will be great to come second and close that gap a lot. And ultimately, because Chelsea drew against London City Lionesses the same day on Saturday that we obviously won 5-0 against West Ham, it meant that they've now gone into fourth technically if we win. This is obviously me actually now I'm thinking about it. This is me assuming we're going to win our games in hand, so we definitely need to make sure that happens over the next couple months. But it's looking like United or Chelsea won't get Champions League football next year unless obviously one of them ends up winning, which hopefully it's not Chelsea because otherwise that means Arsenal got knocked out very quickly in the competition as we're facing them tonight in the quarterfinals. But I do feel like we've kind of helped ourselves by getting our wins, but also it feels like a lot of things are written. I think this is something I constantly am saying on this podcast, that for the men's side, for the women's side, it feels like not only are we doing our thing, but also other teams are helping us get to where we want to be in a lot of aspects, and that is something I'm very excited about. So ultimately the WSL is looking pretty good for us. I think it's actually just crazy because when you look at the table, we've actually lost the least amount of games because we've only lost 1 game, but then City, United have lost 2 games, Chelsea have lost 3 games. It's just kind of interesting. I think the thing that's let us down to basically prevent us from winning the WSL has obviously got to be the amount of draws we've got because we've had so many draws this season. But ultimately, I think compared to where we were a couple months ago when we were looking at Christmas time thinking, oh no, what's going to happen with this? Spurs were creeping up. We were looking like we could actually come fourth. I think we're in a very good spot now. So hopefully that will carry on next week. And obviously I'll get into the predictions for the North London Derby, which will hopefully extend that belief and keep us going in 4th position, hopefully pushing to 2nd. Sadly, I was trying to prolong that section and that game as long as I could, but sadly we've got to talk about it. It was Arsenal 0, Manchester City 2. Obviously, it means that Arsenal didn't win the Carabao Cup and Arteta lost out on a piece of silverware. I mean, the quadruple's completely done now. Obviously, it was kind of unrealistic in the first place, but there was still that hope. And when I was talking to the likes of Romario, who I had on my podcast on the Fan Zone last week, definitely go check it out on Friday, we were saying, well, we're still in that conversation because we were excelling in 4 competitions. Sadly, now we're in the conversation for just the treble, but still, it is a conversation to be had. And I think until we get knocked out of them, it's a conversation that I keep wanting to have. So, yeah, overall mood of this game was frustrating and crushing. I think entering the game, because we were seen as favourites, because, like I've mentioned so many times, everything seemed like it was written for us. Everything was lining up. Even that day, Spurs lost 3-0 to Forest in the relegation battle, which means that they're only 1 point away from being in that relegation zone. And I just felt like in the first 5 minutes, we even showed of this game that we wanted to win. I mean, running down the wing, we looked like we had a few chances. Trafford obviously pulled off that unreal treble save, which, you know what, I think that could have been a bit of a deal breaker because maybe if one of those goals had gone in, I think that could have opened the floodgates potentially, or at least opened up the game to be fairly even. But sadly, after about 20 minutes, I just felt like it was all City. They took complete control. We'd pass the ball, they'd cut the lines. We'd then have to lob it over the top and we were second to the ball. It just felt like everything we were doing, it just wasn't going to find the net. I honestly reckon we could have played for a few hours and just not find the net. It just felt so frustrating. It felt like very few players on that pitch wanted to win. Obviously, we've got a highlight Declan Rice, Saliba, Gabriel. There were a few players that really wanted to win, and you could tell, and I'm so gutted for them, even more so because obviously there are a few players that basically Arteta got criticised a lot for his decision making, because there were a few players that looked like they just didn't want it as much. I mean, we've got to talk about Saka, because he definitely wasn't at his best for this game, and especially when you're wearing that captain's armband, there's so much pressure on you as well. And it was just gutting to see that this season his form has dipped a little bit, bringing on the likes of Dalman. That was chanted quite a bit, and it's crazy that we're relying on a 16-year-old to potentially get us the win. And it's just ultimately the biggest debate that I feel like came out of this game has got to be Kepa or Raya. And I completely understand why Arteta started Kepa, because obviously in contracts, we don't know what happens behind the scenes. And through speaking to a few football agents, it seems as though that's the reason why it had to happen, because there are agreements behind the scenes. Ultimately, he wasn't forced to play Kepa or Raya. And in hindsight, yes, we're all looking at it saying he should have started Raya, but there's no reason why Kepa wouldn't have performed well. I mean, Trafford was the second choice keeper for City, and he performed really well. So I think ultimately, yes, looking at that first goal that went in by O'Reilly, Raya probably would have saved that, and that's a save that I think will haunt Kepa, and it's something I don't want us to dwell on too much, but I do think that a lot of questions were made about Arteta's decisions this game, and I do feel like he stuck by it. He said he doesn't have any regrets, and honestly, hindsight is a beautiful thing, because we're all sat there saying, why have you started him? I mean, to be fair, before the game I was thinking, why is Ryan not playing, when we highlight him so often and say he definitely could be a player of the season for Arsenal. So yeah, bit of an interesting one with that, but obviously let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Obviously we are looking at it from a place of defeat, whereas if we won it and Kepa started, then I don't think we'd be criticising as much, obviously. So I guess, yeah, we're looking at it from a place of a bit sour, a bit bitter about it. And sadly, that's how we have to end the game reflection for this week. Okay, so it's a bit of a switch up this week, because obviously a couple of weeks ago it was mostly talking about the men's games because the women were on their international break, whereas this week the men are on their international break. So we have two games to look ahead to. The first one being in the Women's Champions League and the second one being in the WSL. Honestly, where do I start with the Arsenal-Chelsea game tonight? Obviously, it's tonight at 8 p.m. in the Women's Champions League. It's the quarter-final and it's the first leg of it. We've got the second leg next Wednesday, and yeah, ultimately we can just look at the game that's in front of us. This is quite interesting because this is the first time that these two teams have come up against each other in the Champions League, but also the first time we've had to play across two legs, which I think is quite interesting because obviously for Arsenal, this is a competition that we're decent at. We've done it before. We know, especially under Slagers, that this format suits us. We can excel over two legs, whereas for Chelsea this is something they haven't done yet, and I think for Arsenal we love the bragging rights of owning in the land, and that's something that we need to keep going and we need to push forwards. And ultimately, if Arsenal were able to knock Chelsea out of the Champions League at this stage, it would honestly be amazing. If it happened the other way round, I actually don't know if we'd be able to recover from it. As long as Chelsea didn't go on to win it, I think we'd be okay. But honestly, it's very nerve-wracking. I'm very excited. I'll be at the game. Let me know if you are at the game, because I feel like it'll be a good atmosphere. The Emirates is always a great place to go to if you're an Arsenal fan. If you're not, I feel like Chelsea know that it's quite an intimidating place to go to. Ultimately, I can't predict whether we'll go through or not until we see how tonight's game plays out. And I reckon tonight it'll be an Arsenal win of 3-1. I think it will either be that or a 1-1 draw. But I'm hoping it'll be a 3-1 win for us. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on that, because I feel like that is a nerve-wracking game. We've obviously got a lot that we could talk about with this game, but yeah, I just want to leave it as that because I don't want to jinx anything, and ultimately you can't go into too much detail without actually seeing the first leg in itself. The second game of the week is in the WSL, and it's a North London derby. I feel like this week we've got such big fixtures. Obviously, we know that in the WSL, the North London derby isn't as big as, say, Arsenal versus Chelsea, but because it's all in one week, I feel like we need to definitely be switched on. It'll be interesting, the rotation that Slagers makes. Also, it'll be interesting because this is a 5:30 kickoff at the Emirates. I will also be at this game, so I feel like I'm being spoiled this week of games at the Emirates. And I think why it's interesting is because I've not actually been, this is really random, it's not even linked to football, but I've not actually been to a game where it's either pitch black because it's an 8 p.m. kickoff at the Emirates, or where it's like early in the morning, because recently we've had a lot of 12 kickoffs. So it'll kind of be interesting to see Will the sky be pretty? Will it be sunset? What will the vibe be like? Will it affect the players? Obviously, I hope it only affects them in a positive way. So ultimately, yeah, we have to win this game if we want to come second. We can't obviously underestimate Spurs because I feel like we've mentioned them a lot this season, how they have been pushing for that fourth spot. But I think now, because of the points and because of the games we have in hand, I'm thinking top 4 is definitely off the cards for this season. Next season, you never know, they could keep pushing forwards with that. But yeah, I'm going to probably go with a 2-0 win. I feel like this should be a comfortable win for us. We should be in control, but I guess it depends what happens at the start of the week, which happens tonight. And honestly, I'm so excited. So you know what? I'm just going to round up the episode there because I feel like, yeah, I'm going to get too nervous and too excited that I kind of feel like I should just stop talking. Thank you so much for listening or watching, however you've accessed this podcast. As always, I appreciate anyone subscribing, following, however you want to stay in touch with this podcast. Also, you can stay in touch over on the Arsenal Humans, both on TikTok and on Instagram as well. I feel like I've plugged everything I can. But yeah, have a great week. And hopefully I'll be coming back next week after 2 wins.